TvGrace presents the inexpressible words of God, the gospel of grace, on the lips of Jesus Christ man. Abba, Father.
Well, let's go to the counsel of the word. Today we have a word that's difficult to explain. It's difficult to explain, but we're going to try to explain it. For Paul, it became difficult. So let's look to the book, to the Hebrew, chapter 5. Let's read from verse 7 through 10. Let's all look at our Bibles. Please take notes. This, you should not afford yourself to just hear it like that, especially if you get confused with it. If you don't write it down and study it, this was difficult for Paul to explain. It is to say, we're speaking of revelation. The Apostle Paul received this in paradise. They took him out of the body and they took him to paradise, but you are in the body. So we are talking about infallible words that man is not given to explain. And you are receiving them here and not out of your body, but with your body. When you have it, give me an Abba, Father, and we'll begin to read. Yes, we have it. It says, verse 7, and Christ, who in the days of his flesh, as if to say, after he left the days of his flesh and he went to a glorified body, as you in the days of your flesh. One day, they'll talk about you when you leave the body. They're going to say, so-and-so in the days of his flesh did this. He suffered this happened to him. Jose Luis in the days of his flesh. You in the days of your flesh. Christ in the days of his flesh, because you are a spirit that lives in a body. If you have been just dealing with your flesh, you still don't know you. Today is a great opportunity for you to begin to learn who are you in spirit, because in the days of your flesh, they are not the best. But we have instructions for the days of your flesh. He personally, it says, and Christ who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplications with strong crying and tears unto him that was able to save him from death. It is speaking here of spiritual death, because he came to die. It is to say, not to deliver him from the death he went through, but spiritual death, because if he were to sin, then the world would have fallen in the hands of Satan forever. All of creation would have been lost and would have disappeared. But it says, to him that was able to save him from death, having been heard because of reverent fear. And though he was a son, yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. Say, he learned obedience. That is today's topic, learning obedience, because you and I have to learn obedience. That is learned. That is not known, but it's learned when you live in a body. And we're going to speak of how you learn. And he learned obedience and being made perfect, right? Because people think that baby Jesus, that was perfect. That wasn't perfect. He had to be perfected. Why? Because he was tempted in all things. If you want to believe that he was tempted in all things, look at what verse 15 of chapter 4, right there, without leaving the page, says. What does it say? For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who had been tempted in all things, just as we are. It is to say that if he were to sin, then he could not have been delivered to save us. People think that he came to save us because Mary birthed him. What Mary birthed was a piece of flesh. And that flesh was similar to yours and mine. That's why he had to be perfected. And he had to beg not to sin. That's where the suffering comes in. You know what it is to live in a body such as what you have and not sin? But if he were to sin, then he could not die for us. Truly, we are very appreciative for that. Tremendous. You know what it's a man in a body with so many women there in Jerusalem coming on to him? And with the wrath he could have manifest with the hypocrites. One day he called the Pharisees hypocrites 24 times in one chapter. Pharisees, hypocrites. And he'd overturn the tables because he would get upset. But all of that, he would do it without entering into sin. Because of the hypocrisy, he had to call them out. And it says, and being made perfect, he became the author of eternal salvation. Of what? Eternal salvation. Your salvation is what? Eternal. Salvation unto all them who believe, and was called by God as high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. And now look at what it says, of whom we having much to say about what we've read, and hard to explain since you have become dull of hearing. I couldn't repeat the same. The world today is not prepared to hear. They're prepared to go to the mass, to stop eating meat, to walk on their knees, but to hear, they don't have an ear. But I congratulate you because you don't have an article only, you have an ear. You have an article and an ear. Also, to come here, you have to be someone very special to be seated here. You can give yourself a round of applause for being here. Listen, pastors in Miami, all these leaders, priests, they should be here listening because they know nothing of this. It is unknown to them. Sometimes I speak with priests, and when I speak to them, they lose me. What are you talking about? Because they're not accustomed. In a convent, you don't learn this. In a theological seminary, you don't learn this. If it is unknown to you, how are you going to teach it? I know it, and I could understand it because I was taken to paradise so I could develop my ear. If not, I would understood myself because I was an evangelist for many years and I didn't know any of this. I had an ear of a very short measure because the ear is developed until you understand what you are being told. That's why many of you come here 3 months, confused. And then a year later you say, I understood. As a matter of fact, I knew one that was here 3 years, and one day he passed forward crying and he says, I finally understood. He left the following week and he's never returned. I haven't seen him since. So then, how did Christ learn obedience? Being tempted in all things. Being tempted in all things. He learned obedience because he was tempted in all things. So then what happens? That he learned obedience. Listen to this. Pay attention. He learned obedience to be the author of eternal salvation. Now you have to learn obedience not to be saved because he's already executed that act. You have to learn obedience. You know for what? So you can please him and so that you can reign in life, so you can live well. You know what it is to live well today with a body such as what you have? Look at everyone around you. They're in problems of depression, or you know those people that you talk to and how are you? Well, I have something else now. So what happened now? Well, now I have another problem. Before it was my wife, now it's not my wife. Now it's my son. And now it's my daughter. And now it's my boss. And now it's my job. Now it's mama and daddy and grandpa or my boss, whatever. People are programmed. This system, a system of problems. Unless you learn obedience, and then despite that, you are reigning in life. Listen, it's cost me. I've had to learn obedience through many situations in the days of my flesh. We learn. Don't you see that the experiences we have in our physical bodies is so you can learn? It's not so you say, oh, Lord, forgive me, I'm leaving here. No, don't leave, because if you leave, you're going to lose out. The problems you've had, listen, from habits, from alcohol, from smoking, from drugs, from sex, fornication, adultery, of thievery, of deceiving, or being a liar, everything you've done, it isn't a surprise to God. Oh God, I'm going to tell you something. The Lord knows your path when you get up. Says, from afar you've known me. The idea is that you don't enter into guilt, neither. The idea is that you say, gee, I am not walking well. Lord, allow me to learn obedience through all these weaknesses, these knockdowns that I've been through. He teaches you. The road is long and stretched out. You know why? Because once you learn, what comes is a reign in life that it is to be enviable. Because you're going to walk as few people walk when you learn obedience. Learn obedience? Through what? Through praying 40 days on your knees? You learn nothing there. What those evangelicals teach you, pray 30 days, 15 days, don't eat. Walk on your knees, put stones in your shoes, punish your flesh. You don't punish the flesh in that way. How did Christ punish it? Denying himself, taking her captive to arrive. So therefore, it isn't time for you to begin to cry because of the things that have happened to you, but it's better yet time to learn obedience in what's happened to you. That you're patient, that your wife is patient with you, and you patience with your wife and with your son and daughter, and look for the unity in understanding each other to learn that you can tell your husband or your wife, wait a little longer, I'm arriving. I'm learning. You have not wasted your time and everything you've supported of me. I'm learning obedience. And you learn how, as Christ did. Christ had a body of sin. You're not supposed to go to a church so that the pastor scolds at you or the leader yells at you. You know why God places a man before you? Let's look at verse 15 or verse 1. Because it says, every high priest taken from among men, what is a priest? A man, right? Or a pastor, a man. It's appointed on behalf of God? No, on behalf of man in things pertaining to God. Look at it here. For every high priest taken from among men, it's appointed on behalf of men in things pertaining to God, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices before the cross, right? Gifts and sacrifices before the cross, explaining what a priest was before the cross. After the cross, there are no priests. What are there after the cross? There are teachers. When God puts a man before you in a pulpit, does he put him in favor of God or in favor of man? When you go to a church and the leader tells you, oh, God hates sin, what he's saying is, God hates you, because where is sin? In your flesh. A man that is placed here is to help you, to take you to a training so that you can deal with your physical body without you fainting. That he will comfort you, not that he comes scolding at you to say, oh, that is a good pastor. Look how he preaches. He made me cry, and then he brought me to the pulpit, and I humbled myself there, and he laid his hand on me. That isn't the idea. The idea is that every man that God places here in front to speak to you, it's in your favor. Don't you see that he knows you as the palm? And he was the one that placed all them weaknesses in you. What he's looking for is a man that is an arbiter between God and you, so you can be stimulated and continue to be triumphant. God doesn't put any man so he continues to hurt you, a pastor that's always hurting you or screaming at you saying you're a sinner. No. What does this man think? That I don't know what's in this man's flesh? Every man God places before you is in your favor, but it has to lead you to this. Romans chapter 5, verse 3. Romans chapter 5. What does verse 3 say? And not only this, but we also, verse 1 and 2, it says you were saved by grace and that you have access to this grace and you stand. But then in verse 3, after you're saved and your spirit is well, then in verse 3, he says, and not only this, but we also glory in our tribulations, knowing that tribulations bring about patience. You know what it is to glory in trouble? When somebody is troubled, pray for me, brother. That's what they say, because I am troubled. And you say, no, glory in your trials. No, pray for me. But when you're learning obedience, everything that comes to you, the least trial, you say, I'm going to learn patience here. This is going to produce something better. Though you don't see it at the beginning, you know it's going to produce. Teaches you so that helps you. Romans chapter 14 and verse 13. Therefore, let us not judge one another anymore, but rather resolve this not to put a stumbling block or a cause to fall our brother. We are all learning obedience here. So Paul says, listen, it isn't time for you to be criticizing and saying, look at this one, look at him. Because there are families that deal better with their bodies than others. So the one that's below the family says, look at this man, the way he takes grace as an occasion for the flesh. No, it isn't time for that. You have to decide, I am not going to look at anyone anymore. Let each one carry his own load and each one learn. Because when you look to the side and you begin to look at someone else, you run the risk of twisting the scripture, or better yet, twisting the gospel. Because then you say, the Bible says that, but look at what I'm seeing. No, it isn't time for that. It isn't time for that. It is time for you to mature in faith, and let each one learn from their tribulation. Each one will exercise patience at different times, because if you judge someone, there is a high probability that the angel of that family will make you go through the same thing later or worse. Don't you see that each one here has its own angel? I have an angel that has to correct me, but he corrects me according to how I am understanding so that I do not faint. And he deals with me, and he already knows everything about me. He knows, and he guides me. But you have an angel also. When you get confused, it's when you look to others. You have your own angel that leads you, and he knows all of your steps. So then he disciplines you. It says it like that. Those he takes for sons, he corrects, discipline, and even chastise. They lead you in your personal experience. And you have to be attentive to the voice of that angel that speaks to you here. Look, in the mind, you hear a voice. How many times have he not warned me and I ignore it, and then 2 days later I say, wow, I should have loaned attention to this. I failed. But he's patient with you. But he expects that you learn obedience, because if not, you'll suffer. We don't want to fall in the terrain of legalism. That's why this is difficult to explain, Because, we're going to legalism now, to the law? No, they're going to punish me? No, it isn't that. It's that you have an angel in charge of your life. And the order that that angel has is to take you to prosper. He wants to heal all of your sicknesses. It is great to be healed. It's terrible to be sick. Have you had those days, those gray days, blue days that are evil, that you feel? But when the angel is active, that angel makes provision of all kinds. It's wonderful to have the angel happy. Everything that you touch, you make the best purchases. Nothing goes wrong. I don't know. This is a marvelous thing. Imagine that those angels are there at your service. And if you have an angel, the very last moment, is going to take you to the presence of God, because to hell, he doesn't know how to get there. So we're not talking about condemnation. What we're talking about is today, tomorrow, next week. Christ, look, there is a saying that says that the disciple is not greater than its master. The disciple is not greater than his master. For the master to have become a master, he had to learn and suffered a bit. So it is to say that Christ is the master and you're not better than he is. If he suffered in the days of his flesh, you would suffer in the days of your flesh. And you have to deal with your flesh. And everything that you're doing that is not in line with him, you can look for whatever verse you want to justify yourself. No, you can say, there is no condemnation for those that are in Christ. Hey, don't know me according to the flesh. You can say anything you wish, but the angel does know you according to the flesh. He may not know you, but he knows you. The angel does. And I don't like what you're doing, and I'm going to discipline you. He's done it to me. He's done it to me. He's disciplined me. And I've felt the correction. And I have not liked many things that I go through. But he tells me, Jose Luis, this is because I love you. I have to deal with you. I have to guide you because you're leading the wrong way. And it hurts. It hurt Christ for salvation. It's going to hurt you to reign in life. Because you know what it is to live 33 years without committing a sin with a body of sin? Because if he had a glorified body, so he did nothing for you. Well, if he had a glorified body, I don't suffer. No, the problem is that he came in the likeness of a body of sin. Romans chapter 8, verse 3. Let's look at it. What does Romans chapter 8, verse 3 says? Are we there? For what was impossible for the law, or what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, God sending his own son in the likeness of what? Sinful flesh. Yes, because people say, oh, baby Jesus is pure. Mary, without sin, conceived. That's why she conceived that holy son. Stop those tales. What she birthed came in the likeness of sinful flesh, and she was a sinner. What she birthed was a piece of flesh in the likeness of sinful flesh. The only thing that he learned obedience. If God died for me and he suffered nothing. No, he suffered. And he suffered on the cross in such a way that it says that his heart was torn with suffering. You've seen an animal, when an animal dies, when two animals grow together and one dies, that the other dies of pain. Well, he was torn there. Truly, he made a tremendous sacrifice for us to save us. Thank God, what a work he did. You don't have to do it to be saved. You are saved. But he is interested that now that while you are here, you don't suffer. What he's interested in is that you inherited promises. And it's great to inherit promises. I feel more than privileged that Listen, I have marvelous people, singers that are marvelous, I have chosen friends. I wake up in the morning and I turn on music and I enjoy my day. And I plan my hours. I make a program for today. If I accomplish it, well, I have to do 8 things. But if I accomplish 6, I'm alleviated. And then you plan a lunch or dinner. I'm going to do this, eat that. Today, I'm going to close my day with a flourish. And tomorrow, in victory. And the following. It's great to enjoy life. I would love our days to last 48 hours, but he that doesn't reign in life, he would like to just live 12 hours and disappear in his dream. Oh, and listen to this. And the Christians of the system, that system that's out there, evangelical Christian, those people, they say, Christ, come, hurry up and come, because I can't take it no more. Because those women, they don't fix themselves because it's sin to put earrings and everything is sin. And they can't go to the beach and they can't go to the movie theater. They are prohibited to do everything. They're super bored. Christ, come, come. Like John in Apocalypse. Lord, come. I can't take it no more. You don't have to say that. You are complete. You are reigning. Forgiven, free from the devil, free from sin. We are reigning. Now I'm going to tell you something. Well, let's read Romans chapter 14. I'm going to finish with this. Romans chapter 14. Where we were. In verse 13, it says, therefore, let us not judge one another anymore, but rather resolve this not to put a stumbling block on your brother. I know. Who said I know? I receive, you can say as he did. I know, and I am confident or convinced by the Lord Jesus that there is nothing uncleansed of itself, but to him who considers anything to be uncleansed, to him it is uncleansed. Let's go to Titus 1:15 also. It says, to the pure, all things. How many things? All things are pure. For whom? But to those who are corrupt and unbelievers, nothing is pure, but both their minds and their conscience are corrupt. Listen to me closely. When you don't learn obedience, for you, everything is corrupt. It is to say that you should not dance, you shouldn't drink, you shouldn't go anywhere because you have a corrupt mind. And everything is sin. Now, if you've learned obedience, nothing is corrupt. You know why? Because he who learns obedience is his own master and does not let anything control him. Rather, you control everything. So then, what happens? That you can be with a brother, even here in Growing in Grace, but he has not yet learned obedience. So what you do, it's a stumbling block for him because for him, it is bad. For him, it is bad. So then you are failing the weakened faith. For Paul, he says, I know, I am certain that nothing is corrupt. But for the impure, who's the impure? He that doesn't learn obedience. So then we have people that they're corrupt in everything. So they're weak in faith and they look to the side. Do you see how that sister's dressed? Why did she come dressed like that? You seen so-and-so that he's talking about. They're always looking. So what comes through the eyes gets to their corrupt mind, and it's set and done. I'm not going to church anymore because that church is full of sinners. Why? Because he has not learned. He who learns obedience owns everything. Nothing dominates him. Rather, he dominates everything. You can't prohibit anything. Don't you see to that person? Because he owns himself. He can have a drink, and then when he has a second one, I'm done. You can give him a cigar. He dislikes it. He lays it aside when he knows it's causing harm. You can take him to a dance, a party, and he keeps himself. Rather, he bears witness. You can take him to hell if it exists, and there he will deal well with the demons. Because he learned obedience. But that takes time. That takes time. Now, if you learn obedience, listen, Jesus would go to the Samaritans, the publicans, and he would drink. The problem is that the weak in faith would go by. If he's the Son of God, he wouldn't be hanging around with them. Yes, Pastor, he was drinking Perrier. No, there was no Perrier. What he was drinking was fermented wine. But since he governed, he was the owner of and master of himself, he could have drank wine, and it's not sin because he was perfected to be the author of eternal salvation. If you don't learn obedience, you are a disaster. You can't enjoy this life. You can't do nothing. You are a disaster because you have not learned obedience. You are saved. You are a son of God in disaster, reigning in disaster. The idea is that you reign in life. Because here, no one is trying to be saved. We are saved already. He is the author of an eternal salvation. What's eternal? It's not lost. It's eternal salvation. That's what he came to execute, eternal salvation. But then, you have to reign in life. You have to be well. You have to prosper. Imagine, if you don't prosper, then you are a poor and hopeless individual that's always struggling. If you don't learn obedience, you don't know how to heal yourself. You're always sick. I am sick, I am sick, I am sick. And you don't govern in your mouth. Always have a bad confession. You're always complaining and screaming and doing because you don't reign in your confession. And if you don't learn obedience, you don't have good behavior. You hurt people. Hey, you, move out of the way. Hey, I arrived first. What are you doing there? Calm down, dude. But there are people like that. There are people that don't reign. They live nervously. What's wrong with you? They don't have manners. Don't you see that they haven't learned obedience in nothing? You have to be a gentleman, a lady, learn how to deal with people, to learn to hear, not to be talking away. Calm down, lend me the mic. We must learn obedience for everything, and in doing so, we will reign in life. Blessed, you may stand and greet your brother.